All right, I can't say that this week's Friday edition of the Morning Pit's going to be nearly as good as last week's Friday edition of the Morning Pit, but that's because we don't have Jeff Capel as a guest this week. Capel was great last week. Hopefully you got a chance to check that out. We split it up into two interviews, the Friday interview and the Monday interview. I talked to him for 40 minutes on last Thursday, and quite frankly, probably could have kept him there for twice as long. I mean, like, we could have kept talking for another 40 minutes because it was just that. I mean, there were a lot of things I didn't ask Jeff Capel that I wanted to, but it was, at a certain point you're like, look, how much of this guy's time can I monopolize? I don't need to take up his whole morning, as it were. And the 40 minutes we got, I thought was great. We split it up into the two interviews, and hopefully you got a chance to check those out. Part 1 on Friday, Part 2 earlier this week on Monday. I thought they were great interviews. Jeff Capel is interesting and smart and insightful, and it was a lot of fun to talk to him. And hopefully you enjoyed listening to those interviews. But here we are. It's Friday. That means it's time for a mailbag edition of the Morning Pit on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We take questions from Pitt fans on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. The Between Fifth and Forbes message board is where all the questions are posted throughout the week. We put out the call on Tuesday. Say if you've got a question, please post it here. We got a lot of questions this week, and we'll dive into it. We'll answer as many questions as we can. As you imagine, there's a lot of questions about transfers and about the transfer portal and about situations with transfers and targets and things like that. We'll get into a few other conversation topics as well. So a lot of great questions. Let's jump into it. The Morning Pit mailbag right here on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, I always say that I enjoy doing these mailbags. It's always fun. It's a nice sort of way to approach the end of the week. I kind of enjoy it because you guys come up with the topics. It takes a little bit of load off my shoulders of planning out a show and, what are we going to talk about? What topic are we going to focus on today? And it really kind of turns it over to you. I like it because it makes it, I'll say it's a little bit easier for me, although we still end up doing some research and things like that to be prepared for a few of these questions. But I also like it because it gives you a chance to say, here's what I'm thinking about. Here's what I'm talking, here's what I want to ask you a question about. Please talk about this topic. And I appreciate that. I enjoy that. So we put out the call for questions every Tuesday on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. Let Pitt fans ask as many questions as they want. We answer as many as we can. It's always a good time. I enjoy it. And so thanks to everybody who participated for sure in advance. And if you want to ask a question in the mailbag, you need to be a member at Panther-Lair.com. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. I think it's the best online community of Pitt fans that you're going to find, and it's the way you can ask questions for the mailbag. So you can, obviously all day, every day, you get conversation on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. The mailbag's a once-a-week thing, but you get all those other conversations, so that's always fun to do. But let's get into the questions here. We'll dive into it. Questions this week. PGH Sun J 1325 says, who are the candidates still remaining for Pitt in the portal, primarily on the defensive line, but the ship sailed with the Iowa receiver? So the Iowa receiver was Jacob Bostic, a guy with some local ties. He was targeted by Pitt out of high school a year or two ago. Went into the transfer portal this spring, got targeted by Pitt again. PGH Sun J 1325 asked this question on Tuesday, which would be May 7th. One day later, Jacob Bostic committed to Texas A&M. I haven't really gotten any contact with Jacob Bostic about why he picked Texas A&M or if he ended up actually visiting Pitt. But look, I don't know the circumstances of Jacob Bostic's recruitment, but I think there's something very important that Pitt fans have to understand. Okay, that Pitt is fighting a pretty uphill battle when it comes to going after transfers and winning NIL battles, and it's just the simple truth. Okay, and the guys that they have gotten, the guys that they've been able to get back, the guys who were priority targets, who had options, who you're in competition for, whether it's guys on your current roster you're trying to retain or guys you're trying to get out of the portal, almost across the board, they've gotten them on discount. And the guys that they've held on to, they've gotten on hometown discounts because those players could have gotten more elsewhere. And you can go almost across the board with the priority guys that they have wanted to retain. Could have gotten more elsewhere, but chose to stay with Pitt. Now that's a great story. You know what I mean? Like that's a great, feel good story. Like the relationships are just so strong, and they just love being in Pittsburgh, and they love playing for this staff, and this staff can help them get to where they want to go and realize their goals and all development and all of these things, and it's great. And it's great whether we're talking about Jalen Lowe or we're talking about Kenny Johnson or we're talking about Gavin Bartholomew. I mean, even Bub Carrington. I mean, it was being discussed in those terms before he decided to go to the NBA draft. And it's great. It's fantastic. It's a wonderful story. Except for the fact that it means Pitt can be pretty regularly outspent by a lot of teams. Not everybody. I don't know that Pitt has I'm not going to sit here and say Pitt has the lowest NIL budget in the country. Somebody has to be last, but I'm not going to say Pitt has the lowest NIL budget in the country. But there are a lot of teams that, across college football and the power conferences for sure, that could come in and, if Pitt has an offer on the table for a player, for a transfer, or a player on the current roster, another school could come in and probably beat that offer. Think of it this way. I said this, I don't know when I said it. Either Wednesday night on the live show or maybe yesterday's Morning Pitt, I forget. But like Texas A&M outbid Pitt for Solomon DeShields. For Pitt, Solomon DeShields was a starter. For Texas A&M, he is a depth player. He's a reserve. He's probably not going to be in the starting lineup. He'll play. I think he'll play a decent amount. I think he'll be a good player. But Texas A&M said, we will buy Pitt's starter. We will give him more money just to be a depth piece for us. That should tell you what you need to know about a whole lot of things. Not the least of which being, the ridiculousness of the entire situation, but also, pretty relevantly, Pitt's place in it. Okay? Pitt made an offer for a starter, and Texas A&M, Texas A&M's reserve money, you know what I mean, eclipsed Pitt's starter money. And then, we could go down a long road of conversation about how there should be more of a salary structure and slots and base it on production and experience and all of those things. And yeah, sure, you should have that kind of thing. You should have it, like they have it in other sports of, a starting point guard gets this or a backup, right tackle gets that. Sure, you should have that, but they don't have it. And it's not anywhere close to that. And it's the most unhinged, untethered, completely unstructured system in any sport. Really, I mean, there's probably something more ridiculous, but not that I'm watching. And because of that complete lack of structure, teams just get poached. Teams get poached. And Pitt got poached no less than 5 times this offseason. Depending on what you want to think about the Bengali Kamara situation. Maybe 4. 4 times this offseason. Solomon DeShields, poached. Sam Okunlola, poached. Deion Hayes, poached. DeAndre Jules, poached. Every one of those guys getting more money than they would have gotten at Pitt, and I'm not sure that any of them is going to start. Maybe Sam Okunlola. They all would have been starters at Pitt. They're most, if not all of them, going to be depth pieces, and they're getting more to be a reserve than they would have gotten to be a starter. That tells you a lot about a lot of things. And I bring all this up just to dovetail with your question about defensive line targets. Yeah, I think there are guys out there. I think there have been guys out there. I think they've tried to get guys in addition to the 3 defensive linemen they brought in as transfers in December and January. But I think they've tried to get guys. But the market doesn't favor the team that offers less. And a lot of times, maybe most times, Pitt has been the team offering less. And if they can't convince a kid to take less, then they're not going to get the kid. So that's kind of my view on the portal situation right now. Jake Hyper 09 says, if you could pick 3 positions for the football team to get in the spring portal window, what are they and why? I mean, like, Jake, you could go extreme on this and just be like, oh, well, you would get an All-American quarterback and an All-American pass rusher and an All-American left tackle. Like, realistically, we all know Pitt needs help on the defensive line. We've talked about it all week. I've done multiple morning pits about it. We've talked about it on the message boards. Pitt needs help on the defensive line. We all know that. They have 15 defensive linemen. 3 of them are transfers. Another, 5 are true freshmen. So, you need numbers there. They needed numbers when they thought they would have Dayon Hayes and Nate Temple. You take both of those guys out of the equation, they need numbers even more. They needed a defensive end, and they probably could use some more help at defensive tackle. That's where I would place a huge priority. I think they'll be, I like their group at linebacker. I like their group at safety. I think they'll find guys that they need at, cornerback. I think the running backs are fine. I think the tight ends are fine. I think they'll be okay at quarterback. Wide receiver, I think, leaves a little bit to be desired in terms of trying to get that number 1 guy. And the offensive line needs depth. But if you're going to tell me that I could add 3 players right now to help Pitt, players who are starter worthy, at least 2 of them are defensive linemen, if not all 3. So that's what I would go for. But see also the rant I just went on about the portal. Joey David, question asked on Tuesday that was answered, I think, later in the day on Tuesday, actually. Joey David says, can you get an update on Will Jeffers? Haven't seen any updates from his transfer plans. Would Jeff Capel bring him back if they had an unused scholarship and he doesn't find a new home? So, Jeffers, I think later in the day, and if it wasn't Tuesday, then he did it on Wednesday, ended up committing to Louisiana Tech. So that one's off the board. And funny story, I made someone laugh related to Will Jeffers going into the transfer portal. I made someone laugh. And look, if you can make someone laugh, you've done your good deed for the day. If you can make someone laugh and give someone that kind of joy, then, you've had, I think you've made a positive impact on the world. And I did that on, what day was it? The 8th. So it was on Wednesday, because that was the day that Jeffers announced, and I tweeted it. I quote tweeted it and said, Pitt grad transfer forward Will Jeffers is headed to Louisiana Tech. He'll be remembered for shutting down Efton Reed in the second half of Pitt's win over Wake Forest this past season. And I mean, you remember that. Efton Reed had 1 shot once Will Jeffers started guarding him. He was a non-factor in the game, and Pitt ended up winning the game for a number of reasons, not the least of which was Will Jeffers defending Efton Reed. Well, yesterday, get a little notification on Twitter from the mama bear herself. Efton Reed's mom replies, says, please stop lying, LOL. This post is hilariously funny. Laughing emoji. Thanks for laugh for the day. And so I made her laugh. I made her day. You know what? You're welcome, I guess is what I should say. I didn't reply to it at all, but I guess I should say you're welcome. You're welcome for making you laugh. Efton Reed was a non-factor with Will Jeffers guarding him, and I pointed that out in praise of Jeffers. And Efton Reed's mom, who doesn't follow me, must just have a search always going for Efton Reed's name, apparently took umbrage with my description of that performance. But I made her laugh, and you know what? That's the greatest gift you can give to another person. And so to Efton Reed's mom, you're welcome. So Will Jeffers, best of luck to him. Good kid, smart kid, just didn't work out. Didn't quite live up to the hype or the expectations. Could have been a nice player. Probably need to be down a level. I think ultimately that's probably where he needed to end up. And so hopefully he gets a good opportunity at Louisiana Tech. Next question here. Frank Arms 299 says, with all the crap going on with NIL and transfers, do you think that maybe someone will try and keep playing college ball till they can retire? Well, right now, Frank Arms, there's still rules about eligibility. Eligibility rules have not been taken away. Nothing has changed there. So guys are pushing the limits of it, playing 6 seasons and 7 seasons and things like that. But my guess is you'll see it. Look, if a guy has an extra year that they can use, like we talked about Henry Parrish a couple of weeks ago, the running back who was at Ole Miss and transferred to Miami and now is transferring back to Ole Miss, like, good for you, man. Keep it rolling. Go get money and be in college. But there's still limitations on eligibility. You're going to run out at some point. And so, I don't think you can stay in quite as long as you're suggesting. Roy 10N says, are there any rumblings of guys Jeff Capel has reached out to since Adu Thiero? Referring to Adu Thiero committing to Arkansas this week. I think there's a few guys. I think Miles Kelly, the wing from Georgia Tech, is an interesting option. Probably somebody to keep an eye on there. I think those are the types of guys that they're probably looking for, either a best player available or a 3/4 who can fit in on the wing with how Pitt plays. I think that's what they're looking for. I think that's what they'll ultimately find. They've got 2 scholarship spots left. I think they'll fill at least one of those with a high priority transfer target, and then the other one could be like another like Michael Hewitt or something like that would be my guess. But I don't have a ton of names right now, but I think that's the kind of guy that they'll be looking to get in the portal this spring. As they move forward, they've got some time here, and I do think they'll try to bring somebody else in, and that kind of follows into the next question from Pitt Chag saying, fact or fiction, Pitt basketball enters the fall semester with 13 scholarship players. Recruited as such, not a walk-on who's given a scholarship. I'm going to say fact. I think they'll enter the fall with 13 scholarship players. Like I said, I think they'll get a priority transfer, somebody that they're really kind of high on, and then they'll bring in somebody to fill out that 13th spot who can just be sort of down the depth chart, down the roster, down the bench, and potentially give you minutes in the early non-conference and emergency, desperation, worst case scenario minutes when you get into conference play. So yeah, I think they will. I think they'll end up filling all 13. We'll just see if they do and who it is. Smenges has a good question here, and one that I just don't know if I've got the answer for. Do you think Nate Yarnell can and will be in the top third of ACC quarterbacks this season? So there's 17 teams in the ACC. So top third means, let's call it 6, right? Is that what it would be? You need to be top 6 quarterback in the ACC this year. I mean, I can't even sort of pretend to name off guys. Let me look up. So just kind of doing a quick primer on ACC quarterbacks. I want to I'm trying to run down a list real quick because I want to I'm finding various rankings and things like that. Could he end up being top 6? I think Haynes King from Georgia Tech is getting a lot of pub this offseason. DJU, Uyagalele going to Florida State, who I thought he stunk at Clemson, but I guess he did well at Oregon State. So, he would be one to watch. There's Cam Ward, who went to Miami, is like a guy who's probably going to be in that top 6. Kyron Drones from Virginia Tech, potential there. You do have to watch out for like the SMU and Cal guys and see what emerges there. Cade Klubnik from Clemson. Man, I don't know who's going to emerge. I don't know if there's an obvious. I like Castellanos a lot too from Boston College. I think he's a really good player. I don't know. I don't know who's going to. I don't know. Like to some extent, it depends on how some of these guys play. I think there's some really interesting. I mean, there's a lot of transfers for one thing. As you kind of run through a list of ACC quarterbacks, a lot of guys have transferred in. But off the top of my head, there's probably 5 or 6 guys that we just kind of talked about there that are probably going to be, better than Nate Yarnell. I mean, can he get into the top 6 in the conference? Yeah, I guess. As much as anybody can, if you're not terrible, and I think Yarnell will be okay. There's just too many question marks for me to say he's in the top 6. I just, we talked about the question marks yesterday, and so many of them are on offense, and, that includes Yarnell, includes a lot of the guys he's going to be playing with, and includes the offense he's going to be playing in. So, as I sit here on May 10th, I can't say that he's a top 6 quarterback in the ACC. Maybe I'll feel differently on November 10th or December 10th. But right now on May 10th, can't really do it. Can't do it. All right, let's see if there's one more we want to get out here before we clock out. Yeah, we'll take this. Potter County native says, after your Tuesday morning portal recap, you seemed a bit excited about Cam Corrin and Papa Conti, the Twins, and Zach Austin mixing at the 3, 4, and 5, especially with the Twins at the 3 and 4. Are you imagining some sets with the Twins at 3 and 4, Jalen and Dunn, or Leggett with Corrin and Conti, or one of the Twins at the 5? A lot of combos and some fun Capel could have with the current roster. If you're listening to me read that question and saying I'm lost at what you're actually asking, it's not. I mean, I'm reading the question and I'm having a hard time piecing together. I think what we're talking about is position versatility, right? Zach Austin is going to spend most of his time at the 3, but he could play the 4. Guillermo Diaz-Graham is probably, I think he's going to spend most of his time at the 4, but he could play the 5. Cam Corrin's pretty locked in at the 5. Papa Conti's pretty locked in at the 5. Jorge Diaz-Graham could play the 3 or the 4, and I think that his minutes will probably depend most on whether they need him to replace Cam or Zach Austin, or whether they need him to replace Guillermo Diaz-Graham. I think you'll. So I think it's that versatility that each of those guys has. I think Austin will spend most of his time at the 3. I don't see as much with him playing at the 4. I could be completely wrong about this, but I think your 4 minutes are largely going to go to Guillermo and Jorge, and they could also play together. I would imagine you'll see less Guillermo and Jorge together at the 3 and the 4. You might see more of it at the 4 and the 5, with Guillermo playing the 5, getting minutes, to give Corrin a breather or just for matchups or whatever it may be. And in those instances, I think you could see Jorge at the 4 and Guillermo at the 5. People often talk about the Diaz-Graham twins being the centers. Like, Jorge has never been a center. He's not a center. They've always maintained that he's a wing. He's going to play on the wing. Your center, he's not going to play center this year. Your centers this year are going to be Cam Corrin, Guillermo Diaz-Graham, and Papa Conti in some order, with Corrin starting and then probably matchups or personnel decisions going after that. With I would imagine Conti getting the bulk of the backup minutes, the number 2 minutes, and then Guillermo rotating in there. What's going to make it interesting, and what I think will limit the amount of time that Guillermo and Jorge play together at the 3 and the 4, is how much I think they're probably going to use 3 guard lineups. You know what I mean? When you have Jalen Lowe, you have Ishmael Leggett, and you have Damian Dunn plus Brandon Cummings, I think they had less depth than that last year, and they used 3 guard lineups a ton. So they have more depth, talented guards, more experienced guards. They're going to use those 3 guard lineups even more, I think. Now that cuts into Zach Austin's minutes. It cuts into Jorge Diaz-Graham's minutes. And potentially, if they end up playing Jorge over Guillermo more, or even play Zach Austin at the 4 more, it's going to cut into Guillermo's minutes as well. So there are a lot of moving pieces. There are a lot of combos, like you said. And it's pretty interesting to me to see. It's going to be interesting to me to see how they play it out, of what they choose and what they do and how they use guys and where they use guys. But that's kind of how I see it now. Those guys slotting into those positions. All right. Hey, do me a favor. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. All day or every day of the week, we have these morning Pitt videos. We have our weekly live show on Wednesday nights. And anything else that might pop up, we might go live and talk about it right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you tune in, like this video, and subscribe, and that way you won't miss any of it. And of course, check out the website Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, where we get all the questions for this Friday morning Pitt mailbag, and where Pitt fans are talking all day, every day. It's the best online community of Pitt sports fans that you're going to find, so you should be part of it at Panther-Lair.com. Thanks so much for watching the Morning Pitt Mailbag today. Thanks for watching these videos all week. We appreciate that for sure. I hope you have a great Friday and a great weekend, and we'll catch up with you on Monday for the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.